Henry Whitmore's sprawling ranch lay quiet under a blanket of frost, the kind of stillness that seemed to echo through the empty halls of his mansion. At 62, Henry was a man of wealth and influence, but also of solitude. His fortune amassed through decades of shrewd investments and tireless ranch work had provided him with every comfort. Imaginable expansive rooms filled with expensive furniture, polished floors that reflected the golden morning light, and an array of prized horses grazing in the fields. Yet, despite the grandeur surrounding him, Henry's life felt hollow. The laughter of children, the warmth of a partner's hand, these were the luxuries that wealth could not buy. On Christmas morning, the quiet in the house seemed particularly loud. The echoes of past celebrations haunted him. The scent of pine from the Christmas tree he had once adorned with his late wife, Margaret, and the excited shrieks of his children, now grown and scattered across the country. He wandered from room to room, touching the mantel where stockings once hung, feeling the absence that had grown heavier with time. His children had drifted away after the bitter disputes over the family estate, and Margaret had passed 10 years prior, leaving a void no fortune could fill. Henry dressed slowly, the familiar routine of a wealthy rancher feeling oddly empty today. He donned a heavy wool coat, gloves, and a hat, preparing to ride into town for supplies. Outside, the ranch was transformed into a winter wonderland, frost sparkling like diamonds on every surface, the early morning sun casting long shadows across the fields. Even the horses seemed unusually spirited, their breath rising in misty clouds as they neighed softly, as if sensing their master's melancholy. As he saddled his favorite horse, a black stallion named Midnight, Henry felt the familiar sting of loneliness. He had spent years perfecting his life in isolation, convincing himself that solitude was preferable to the complications of human connection. And yet, the emptiness gnawed at him, particularly on a day like this, when the world seemed to celebrate togetherness. Even the dogs, loyal companions though they were, could not fill the aching silence that had settled into his bones. Riding through the winding roads toward the small town nearby, Henry reflected on the traditions he once cherished. He remembered Margaret's laughter as they decorated the house, the way his children's eyes lit up at the sight of presents, and the warmth of a family united in love. Now, those memories felt almost like another life, beautiful, yet inaccessible. The town itself was already bustling with the holiday spirit. Lights twinkled in shop windows, children ran with scarves trailing behind them, and the scent of fresh bread and roasted chestnuts drifted through the crisp air. Henry tried to shake the melancholy as he passed familiar streets. His interactions with townsfolk were polite but distant. He had long avoided social entanglements, preferring the company of animals and the vast quiet of his land. Yet even amidst the cheerful chaos he felt like an outsider, a man who had learned to live among people without truly connecting with them. As he turned a corner near the town square, something unusual caught his eye, a pair of small figures struggling with a large wrapped envelope. Even from a distance, he could see the determination etched on their tiny faces. The children, twins, seemed almost impossibly focused on their task, balancing the oversized letter with careful hands. There was a sense of urgency in their movements, a hopefulness that Henry could not quite place. He slowed his horse, curiosity piqued despite himself. For the first time in a long while, he felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, interest perhaps, or the faint stirrings of human connection. Henry watched silently, unsure whether to approach. He had long forgotten how to deal with children, and the sight of them reminded him painfully of the family he had lost. And yet, something about the twins' persistence, their clear belief in a world where wishes could come true, tugged at a part of him that had been dormant for too long. Little did he know, this small encounter on a snowy Christmas morning would be the first step in a journey that would change the rhythm of his lonely life forever. Henry Whitmore watched the twins carefully as they struggled with the oversized envelope. One of the girls, with chestnut curls bouncing under a red knit hat, teetered on her tiptoes, trying to balance the letter while the other, slightly shorter and more determined, clutched the edges tightly. Their cheeks were flushed from the cold, and despite their small hands turning red from the icy air, neither of them seemed willing to let go. Henry dismounted slowly, the crisp snow crunching under his boots. The twins froze for a moment, wide-eyed at the tall, imposing figure approaching them. At first, they instinctively took a step back, as if unsure whether this stranger could be trusted. But something in Henry's careful, non-threatening movements seemed to calm them. He crouched slightly to meet their gaze, keeping his voice soft and warm. "Good morning," he said. "That looks like a heavy envelope. Need some help?" The girls glanced at each other, exchanging a quick, nervous whisper. Then the taller one spoke, her voice small but clear. It's for Santa," she said, holding the envelope tighter. "We wanted to send it ourselves, but we can't. The post office is too far, and we don't have money for postage." Henry raised an eyebrow, curiosity piqued. He hadn't expected honesty, and certainly not a request directed at him, a complete stranger. "For Santa?" he asked, trying to hide the faint amusement that tugged at the corner of his mouth. "And you want me to send it?" The twins nodded eagerly. "Please," the shorter one added, her eyes shining. "Can you send it? We really want Santa to get it before Christmas." Henry paused. The request was unusual, almost absurd. Yet he felt a surprising tug at his chest. He had spent so many Christmases alone, disconnected from the joy and warmth of family. These girls, with their innocent hope and unshakable faith, reminded him of the spirit of the holiday he had long forgotten. He found himself studying the envelope, carefully wrapped with bright red paper, golden ribbons curling around it, and the neat handwriting of someone who clearly cared deeply about their message. I suppose I could," he said finally, his voice hesitant but steady. "But, I'm not exactly sure how to get it to Santa." The twins exchanged a hopeful look. "That's okay," the taller one said. "We just want him to get it." "You can figure it out, please?" Henry chuckled softly, shaking his head. He was not used to children asking favors of him, nor did he remember the last time he had granted one with genuine pleasure. Still, there was something magnetic about their hopefulness, their belief that a stranger could help make a miracle happen. Slowly, he nodded. "All right, I'll help you." The twins gasped, their small hands clasped together in delight. "Really?" the shorter one asked. "You'll really do it?" "Really," Henry confirmed, a rare smile touching his lips. It was small and hesitant, but it was there, a crack in the armor of his solitude. As they walked toward a nearby bench to rest, the girls chattered excitedly, explaining what they had written in their letter. They spoke of small wishes, a warm coat for their little brother, a new set of crayons, and a storybook they had both wanted for months. They described their home and their parents' struggles, though never in a tone of complaint, just matter-of-fact statements of their reality. Henry listened, each detail tugging at his heartstrings, making him realize how sheltered his own life had been. For the first time in many years, Henry felt a connection. Not one rooted in wealth or status, but in something far simpler and purer: empathy, trust, and shared humanity. These girls, so small yet so brave, had unknowingly cracked open the door to his heart. He realized that helping them would not just be about delivering a letter. It would be a step toward rediscovering the warmth and joy he had been missing for decades. As they planned how he might get the letter to Santa, Henry found himself speaking to the girls in a way he hadn't spoken in years, gentle, patient, almost fatherly. He promised them he would do his best, though he didn't yet know how, and their eyes sparkled with belief. And in that moment, standing in the snow beside these two hopeful children, Henry Whitmore understood that this Christmas might not be as lonely as he had thought. After parting ways with the twins, Henry Whitmore rode slowly back toward his ranch, his mind restless. The crisp winter air did little to clear the thoughts swirling in his head. He replayed the encounter over and over, their wide, hopeful eyes, the tiny hands gripping the oversized envelope, and the earnest way they had entrusted a complete stranger with their most cherished wishes. It was unusual, almost audacious, for children to place such trust in someone they had just met. And yet, there had been no fear in them, only faith. Henry's first instinct was to dismiss it as folly. After all, he was a man of reason, accustomed to handling business, cattle, and land, not childlike fantasies or magical letters. He worried that offering to help might lead to trouble or disappointment. What if the letter got lost? What if the girls misunderstood the outcome? His mind raced with practical concerns, as it always did, but underlying them was a quiet, nagging feeling he had not experienced in years. Curiosity, tinged with something like hope. Back at the ranch, Henry dismounted and led Midnight to the stables, stroking the horse's mane absent-mindedly as he pondered. The barn smelled of hay and leather, familiar and grounding. Yet even here he could not shake the feeling that his life had been waiting for something, or someone. He recalled Margaret's laughter, his children's excitement, and the warmth of Christmas mornings long past. He had spent decades isolating himself from people, believing that solitude was safer and easier than connection. And yet, the memory of those two small girls had cracked a door he had thought permanently sealed. Henry poured himself a cup of coffee, staring out the window at the sun glinting off the snowy fields. He weighed the options. On one hand, he could quietly forget the encounter and continue his life as usual, as he had done for years. On the other, he could honor the girls' request, embarking on a small but meaningful journey to deliver their letter. It was a trivial task in the grand scope of the world. Yet the thought of helping them stirred an unfamiliar warmth in his chest. Finally, Henry's curiosity won out. He decided he could not simply ignore their trust. If only for the sake of seeing those smiles again, he muttered under his breath. He knew there was more to it than mere duty. The girls had reminded him of something vital, something he had forgotten amidst wealth and solitude. The joy of human connection, the satisfaction of giving without expectation. The next morning, Henry called his longtime ranch hand Tom, a loyal and pragmatic man who had worked alongside Henry for decades. "Tom," Henry said, his voice unusually hesitant, "I need your help with something unusual." Tom looked up from cleaning the tack. "Unusual how, boss?" Henry hesitated. It was not like him to admit vulnerability or to ask for help in matters unrelated to the ranch. "I met two girls yesterday," he explained slowly. "They have a letter for Santa, and I promised them I would see it delivered. I don't exactly know how to do it, and I could use some advice. Or company." Tom's face broke into a grin, understanding immediately. "Sounds like a fine adventure, boss. Count me in. We'll make sure Santa gets it, no problem." Henry smiled faintly, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. For the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of excitement, tinged with uncertainty. He realized that this wasn't just about delivering a letter, it was about taking a small step toward breaking the walls he had built around his life. That afternoon, Henry sat in his study, carefully examining the envelope the girls had entrusted to him. It was decorated with glittering stickers, colorful drawings, and neat handwriting, each stroke filled with love and hope. He couldn't help but feel a connection to the children, even though they were strangers. Their innocence challenged his long-held belief that life was cold and transactional. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, Henry had made a decision. He would help the girls, and he would do it in a way that made their experience magical. He didn't yet know all the details, but he knew he was willing to step outside his comfort zone. Something told him that this Christmas, and these two small girls, could change everything, not just for them, but for him as well. And so with a mixture of hesitation and curiosity, Henry prepared to embark on a journey that would test his patience, his ingenuity. and most importantly, his capacity for joy, a journey that began with a simple promise to deliver a letter to Santa. The morning after Henry decided to help the twins, the ranch buzzed with unusual energy. Even the horses seemed to sense something different as Henry walked briskly through the stables, checking each animal and muttering plans under his breath. The promise he had made to the girls lingered in his mind like a warm ember, flickering with excitement and anticipation. This wasn't just about delivering a letter. It was about creating a small miracle for two children who had trusted him completely. And perhaps, though he didn't yet admit it to himself, it was about reclaiming a fragment of the joy he had long abandoned. Henry called Tom to the barn early that morning. Tom, ever practical and steady, leaned on the wooden fence, listening intently as Henry outlined what he had in mind. "We can't just drop the letter in a mailbox," Henry said, pacing. "Not for them. We need to make this special, magical, something they'll remember for the rest of their lives." Tom nodded, smiling. "I think I understand, boss. A sleigh ride, maybe? Something festive?" "Yes," Henry replied, warming to the idea. "A sleigh ride through the fields, decorations, lights, maybe even a stop at the town square. Something that feels like a real Christmas adventure. They're little. They need wonder, not just practicality." Together they began planning the logistics. Henry decided they would use the ranch's old sleigh, polished to a gleaming shine, and deck it with ribbons, pine boughs, and strings of twinkling lights. Tom fetched blankets, lanterns, and even a few baskets of treats: hot chocolate, freshly baked cookies, and a small bag of candy canes. Henry, who had not engaged in childlike creativity in decades, found himself choosing decorations and trimming the sleigh with a surprising attention to detail. As they worked, Henry couldn't help but smile. The barn, usually a place of routine work and chores, transformed into a hub of Christmas magic. Hay bales were arranged as cozy seating, lanterns cast a warm glow on the walls, and strings of lights glimmered like stars. Even Tom, seasoned as he was in ranch life, found himself humming a cheerful tune as he tied decorations to the sleigh. Henry paused to consider the girls' perspective. He remembered their shy smiles, the way their eyes had shone with hope. He wanted them to feel a sense of wonder, a memory that would outlast any material gift. "It's not just about sending the letter," he murmured. "It's about giving them the story they'll tell for years." By midday, everything was ready. The sleigh stood gleaming outside, blankets neatly folded for warmth, lanterns swaying gently in the breeze. Henry reviewed the plan: pick up the girls from their home, ride through the snow-covered fields, stop at the town square where they could see the festive displays, and finally deliver the letter at the post office or, if they preferred, leave it in a special Santa drop box arranged by the local fair committee. Despite the meticulous planning, Henry felt a flutter of nervousness. He had spent so long avoiding people, especially children, that the idea of orchestrating such a magical journey felt both exhilarating and terrifying. What if the girls were disappointed? What if something went wrong? Yet the thought of seeing their faces light up kept the nerves at bay. Finally, as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting golden light across the snow, Henry stood back and surveyed their preparations. For the first time in years, he felt anticipation rather than emptiness. The barn and sleigh were ready, the snacks packed, and a sense of possibility filled the air. This Christmas morning had become more than a simple errand. It was a bridge connecting Henry to the joy he had long forgotten, a chance to step out of isolation and into warmth, laughter, and wonder. As he glanced at Tom, who was adjusting the lanterns one last time, Henry realized that the journey ahead was about far more than delivering a letter. It was about opening his heart to others, about rediscovering the simple, profound magic of giving without expectation, and about embracing a Christmas he thought he had lost forever. And with that, Henry knew it was time to bring the twins into his carefully crafted world. to begin an adventure that would forever change all their lives. The sun had barely crested the horizon when Henry Whitmore rose with a newfound energy he hadn't felt in years. The promise he had made to the twin girls weighed sweetly on his mind, and for the first time, he realized that Christmas could be more than a solitary ritual. It could be an opportunity to create wonder. Today, the ranch would transform, and with it, perhaps even Henry's long-dormant heart. He and Tom set to work in earnest. The old barn, usually a utilitarian space for horses and equipment, became their canvas. Strings of twinkling lights were draped across the wooden beams, casting a soft glow that made the hay smell even warmer and more inviting. Pine boughs were woven around the posts, the scent mingling with the crisp winter air and stirring memories of Christmases long past. Hay bales were arranged in cozy clusters, covered with soft blankets to provide warmth for small bodies. Even the sleigh was touched up with care, its polished wood gleaming under the morning light. Ribbons curled delicately around the sides, and lanterns swayed gently, their flickering flames promising light and magic. As they worked, Henry found himself thinking about the girls. He recalled their shy but determined expressions, the way they had clutched the envelope for Santa as though it contained their very hearts. He imagined their laughter filling the barn, their wide eyes reflecting the lights, and he felt a flutter of excitement he had not known in decades. The idea that he could create a memory for them, something they would treasure forever, filled him with purpose. Tom, ever practical yet equally invested in the fun, brought over baskets filled with treats. Hot chocolate, rich and steaming, sat in a thermos, while cookies and candy canes were arranged neatly in festive tins. "They'll love this," Tom said, smiling at Henry. "Not just the sleigh, but the little things too." "It's the details that make magic," Henry nodded, realizing the truth in Tom's words. Magic was not just in grand gestures. It was in thoughtfulness, in the care taken to notice the little things that made life special. He carefully placed a small hand-carved wooden ornament on a hay bale, imagining how the twins would squeal in delight. He set out crayons and blank paper, remembering the joy of his own children's scribbles long ago. As the morning passed, Henry's anticipation grew. He checked and rechecked the sleigh, adjusted lanterns, and fluffed blankets. Each task, though simple, felt significant. He was no longer simply preparing for a mundane errand. He was preparing to open his home and heart to two small strangers who had, in a single conversation, reminded him of the joy and innocence he had almost forgotten. By mid-morning, the barn was transformed into a winter wonderland, warm and inviting despite the snow-covered fields outside. The sleigh gleamed like a jewel, the lights sparkling like stars, and the scents of pine, cookies, and fresh snow mingled in the air. Henry stepped back, surveying their work, and felt a thrill of satisfaction. He could already imagine the girls' wide-eyed wonder as they entered, their laughter echoing in the wooden beams, their excitement bubbling over. When the girls finally arrived, accompanied by their cautious but smiling mother, Henry felt an unexpected nervousness. He had spent years avoiding children, unsure how to interact beyond polite conversation. Yet now he found himself wanting everything to be perfect. The twins, however, were fearless. They rushed forward, eyes wide and mouths agape, completely enthralled by the sparkling barn and the decorated sleigh. Their small hands reached for the blankets, lanterns, and baskets of treats, squeals of delight echoing through the rafters. Henry's heart swelled in a way he had not anticipated. In the faces of these two little girls, he saw hope, trust, and the pure magic of Christmas. And for the first time in decades, he felt the warmth of human connection, a light igniting in his chest that promised the start of something new, not just for them, but for himself as well. The twins practically bounded into the barn, their boots crunching in the soft layer of snow that had been tracked inside. Their eyes were wide with wonder, taking in every detail, the twinkling lights strung across the wooden beams, the lanterns casting a golden glow on the hay-strewn floor, The sleigh polished to perfection, and the baskets of treats neatly arranged as if placed by Santa himself. For them, the barn was a world of magic, a sharp contrast to the quiet, lonely reality they often faced at home. Henry Whitmore stood near the sleigh, trying to mask his nervousness. He wasn't used to children, much less children who regarded him with complete trust and expectation. Yet the sight of the twins' joy, their eager faces lit with uncontainable excitement, softened him in ways he hadn't anticipated. The barn, usually a place of routine work, had transformed into a bridge between his solitary life and the warmth he had long forgotten. The taller twin, with curls peeking from beneath her red knit hat, approached cautiously. She held the envelope carefully in both hands, as if it were the most precious object in the world. "This is it," she said softly. "For Santa. Can you make sure he gets it?" Henry knelt down slightly, lowering himself to their level. "I promise," he said, his voice gentle, almost reverent. "I will make sure Santa receives your letter. But first, tell me, what did you put in it?" The shorter twin grinned, eyes shining. "We told Santa about our little brother and the crayons we want and a storybook. And we drew him pictures." She held up a small sketch, a colorful rendition of the three siblings in front of a Christmas tree. The drawings were simple, yet brimming with love and hope. Henry felt a lump form in his throat. These children, strangers to him, were entrusting him not only with a letter but with their dreams. For a moment, he imagined what it would be like if his own children, grown and distant, had looked at him with such faith. The contrast was sharp and poignant, and it stirred feelings he had buried for decades. "Wow," he said softly, taking the envelope with care. "These are wonderful. Santa is going to love them." He straightened, smiling as best he could. "And you've made my job very important. This letter deserves a special delivery." The twins exchanged a delighted look, their hands clasped together in excitement. "Really?" the taller one asked. "You're going to make it special?" Henry nodded. "Absolutely. You'll see. It will be magical." Even as he spoke, a strange warmth filled him, a combination of anticipation, joy, and a twinge of humility. The simplicity of their trust and the purity of their wishes reminded him that life's greatest gifts were often intangible. The feeling of connection, the act of kindness, the spark of hope in someone's eyes. Tom, watching quietly from the sidelines, gave Henry an encouraging nod. "They're going to remember this forever, boss," he said. "And so will you." Henry smiled, realizing Tom was right. In orchestrating this small adventure, he was not only giving the girls a memorable Christmas, but also reclaiming a piece of himself he had lost over the years. He could feel his walls, built from loneliness and routine, beginning to crumble. The twins eagerly followed Henry to the sleigh, wrapping themselves in warm blankets and leaning close to the glowing lanterns. Their chatter bubbled over in excited burst questions about the sleigh, the lights, and whether Santa might actually be watching. Henry answered with patience and gentle humor, something he hadn't practiced in years, finding the rhythm of conversation with children both awkward and exhilarating. When the final preparations were made and the girls were snug and ready, Henry held the envelope one last time. This wasn't just a letter anymore. It was a symbol of trust, hope, and connection. As he looked at the twins' shining eyes, he realized that this simple promise had become something far greater, a chance to open his heart, to step into the joy of giving, and to rediscover the magic of Christmas for himself. The sleigh creaked gently as Henry Whitmore lifted the reins, guiding Midnight and the other horses out of the barn. The twins leaned forward in excitement, their small hands gripping the edges of the sleigh, blankets wrapped snugly around their shoulders. The crisp winter air bit at their cheeks, turning them rosy, and the snow sparkled like crushed diamonds in the morning sunlight. Henry felt a strange thrill, one he hadn't experienced in decades. For the first time in years, he was part of something that mattered. Not wealth, not land, not business, but pure joy. As they set off across the snow-covered fields, the horses' hooves making soft rhythmic thuds against the ground, the twins began chattering animatedly. They asked Henry questions about the sleigh, about the lights, and even about Santa himself. "Do you really think he'll get our letter?" the taller one asked, eyes wide. Henry smiled beneath his scarf. "I don't know how he does it, but yes, I think he will." "And you've done your part. This letter is perfect." The ride was not without its challenges. A sudden gust of wind blew snow into their faces, causing the shorter twin to giggle uncontrollably while trying to shield herself with her mittens. The horses startled slightly at a loose branch, prompting Henry to steady them with calm authority. Even small mishaps seemed infused with magic, their minor tensions offset by laughter, warmth, and the sense of shared adventure. Each moment, Henry realized, was part of the experience, a memory in the making. As they glided through the fields, Henry began to notice more than just the joy in the twins' faces. He noticed the beauty of the world he had often ignored, the sunlight sparkling on snow-laden branches, the quiet rhythm of the horses' hooves, the distant call of birds flying against the pale winter sky. Normally, he would have seen only work, only the tasks that demanded attention. But today, everything felt heightened, alive, magical. The twins took turns pointing out snowmen they imagined, critiquing clouds shaped like animals, and singing snippets of Christmas carols, their voices harmonizing with the soft clop of the horses' hooves. Henry found himself joining in, singing quietly under his breath, smiling at how natural it felt to be part of this small, happy world. For the first time in decades, he felt like he belonged. Midway through the journey, they stopped at a small hill overlooking the town square, already bustling with festive preparations. Henry lifted the twins out of the sleigh so they could get a better view. The sight before them was dazzling. Colorful lights strung across shop windows, vendors selling roasted chestnuts and sweet treats, children laughing and sledding in the snow. The twins' eyes widened with wonder, their hands clasped together, and Henry felt a profound sense of fulfillment wash over him. "It's beautiful," the taller twin whispered, leaning close. "Thank you for bringing us here." Henry's heart tightened. "No, thank you," he said quietly. "You've reminded me what it's like to feel magic, to see joy the way children do. This is the best part of my Christmas, honestly." As the sleigh continued toward the post office where the letter would be mailed, Henry reflected on the day. He realized that this journey wasn't just about the twins or the letter, it was about the rekindling of his own capacity for joy, empathy, and connection. He had spent too long in isolation, letting wealth and pride substitute for human warmth. Today, snow and laughter and trust had broken through, reminding him that life's richest rewards were not material, they were the moments shared, the smiles received, and the memories created. By the time they reached the small post office, Henry felt transformed. The twins were practically buzzing with excitement, their cheeks flushed with cold and exhilaration. He handed over the letter with care, watching as they waved and giggled, confident that their wishes were now on their way to Santa. For Henry, it wasn't just a letter being sent. It was a promise kept, a heart reopened, and a Christmas truly remembered dot as the sleigh rattled gently on its return journey. Across the snow-laden fields, Henry Whitmore sat quietly watching the twin girls chatter and laugh, their small voices mingling with the soft jingle of the harness bells. Their energy was boundless, a stark contrast to the deep stillness Henry had grown accustomed to in his lonely home. He felt a warmth in his chest he hadn't recognized in decades, a combination of satisfaction, pride, and something more elusive, the quiet joy of giving without expectation. Henry's mind wandered back to the years he had spent in isolation. He had accumulated wealth, influence, and even a reputation of respect. Yet those things had never filled the void left by absence of genuine connection. Business deals, cattle auctions, and estate management had dominated his life, leaving little room for relationships, for laughter, or for love. He had convinced himself that solitude was preferable to disappointment, that wealth could replace the need for companionship. And yet, in the simplicity of this snowy afternoon, with two small children trusting him completely, he realized how hollow his world had been. The girls leaned against the blankets, sharing a tin of cookies and whispering excitedly about the letter they had just entrusted to him. "Do you think Santa will really come?" asked the shorter twin, her wide eyes sparkling. Henry smiled softly, feeling the edges of his old defenses soften. "I don't know exactly how he does it," he said, "but I do know that you've done your part. You wrote your wishes with love and hope. That's all anyone can do." The taller twin looked at him seriously. "Thank you for doing this for us." Most grown-ups wouldn't even stop. Henry felt a lump in his throat. Her words were simple, yet they struck him with a clarity that made him reassess himself. For years he had focused on what he had, what he could gain, and what he had lost, never considering how small acts of kindness could ripple through someone else's life. He realized in a quiet but profound way that wealth alone meant nothing without generosity, without the courage to touch another person's heart. Tom, riding quietly at the back, gave Henry an approving look. "You're learning fast, boss," he said. "Not about money or business, but about life." Henry chuckled softly, the sound foreign yet comforting. He watched the girls laugh as a flock of birds passed overhead, their white wings catching the sunlight. In that moment, Henry understood the essence of giving. It wasn't about grandeur or recognition. It was about thoughtfulness, presence, and the ability to make someone else feel seen, valued, and cherished. He thought about the letter once more, the simple piece of paper that had carried the twins' hopes. The act of delivering it had become far more than a task. It had become a bridge connecting his lonely heart to the world around him. For the first time, he felt that he could be part of something larger than himself, that he could make a difference in ways that money alone could never accomplish. By the time the sleigh returned to the ranch, Henry's transformation was quietly taking root. The girls hopped out, cheeks flushed and eyes shining with excitement, and he realized that their joy had rekindled something he had thought lost forever, the ability to care deeply and openly without reservation or fear. He felt lighter, freer, more alive. As the twins waved goodbye and ran toward their home, Henry stood by the sleigh, gazing out over the snow-covered fields. He reflected on the lessons of the day. Generosity was a gift to both giver and receiver. Trust was powerful in its simplicity, and the smallest acts of kindness could awaken long-dormant parts of the soul. For Henry Whitmore, Christmas had become more than a date on a calendar. It had become a mirror reflecting the parts of himself he had nearly forgotten, a reminder that the true magic of the season lay not in gifts or decorations, but in connection, empathy, and love. And as he turned to head back to the warm lights of the barn, Henry knew that his life, though once lonely and solitary, had begun to open to the possibility of joy of companionship and of the profound satisfaction that comes from giving selflessly. The sleigh rattled softly as Henry guided Midnight and the other horses toward the town post office. The twin girls were perched in the blankets, bundled against the cold, their cheeks glowing from the ride and their excitement barely contained. They were practically vibrating with anticipation, whispering to each other about whether Santa would read the letter that very night. Henry smiled quietly, watching them, feeling a rare sense of fulfillment and wonder welling in his chest. When they arrived at the post office, the quaint building was already decorated for the holidays. Twinkling lights framed the windows, and a small wooden sleigh sat in front, designated for letters to Santa. Children had already been leaving their own notes, the paper stacked neatly in the miniature post slot, waiting for the magic to happen. Henry carefully helped the twins down from the sleigh, steadying them as they trotted toward the little post box. The taller twin's hand trembled slightly as she held the envelope. "Do you think it will get there?" she asked softly, looking up at Henry with wide, earnest eyes. Henry crouched to meet her gaze. "I promise it will," he said. "It's in the right place now. Santa's helpers will see it, and I have no doubt he'll know exactly what to do." The shorter twin took a deep breath, then gently slid the envelope into the slot. For a moment, she held it there, almost as if making sure it reached the right hands. Then, with a final push, it disappeared, leaving only the hope and trust embedded in every carefully written word and every crayon drawing. The girls exchanged triumphant smiles, clapping their hands together in glee. Henry felt a lump in his throat. It wasn't just the act of sending a letter. It was the culmination of a journey that had started with a simple request. He had watched the girls' joy, guided them through a magical sleigh ride, and helped create memories that would last a lifetime. And in the process, he had discovered a long-forgotten joy within himself, the joy of giving, of trusting, and of opening his heart to others. Tom, standing beside him, gave a quiet chuckle. "Look at them, boss. That's the magic right there. It's more than the letter, it's everything you did to get it here." Henry nodded slowly, watching the twins spin around in the snow, their laughter echoing in the cold air. He thought about the many Christmases he had spent alone, surrounded by wealth but devoid of warmth, and realized how much he had missed by closing himself off. The small, simple act of delivering a letter had reminded him of what truly mattered: connection, trust, and the small miracles of everyday life. As they prepared to leave, the twins hugged Henry tightly, their warmth pressing against his coat. "Thank you," the taller one whispered. "This is the best Christmas ever." Henry felt his chest tighten with emotion. "No, thank you," he replied softly. "You've reminded me of something I thought I had lost forever, and I'll never forget this day." The journey back to the ranch was quieter, the twins content and sleepy under the blankets. Henry rode in silence, reflecting on the lessons he had learned. Generosity and kindness were not just gifts to others, they were gifts to oneself. Trust, once given and honored, could open doors thought permanently closed. And the simple act of believing, whether in Santa or in human goodness, could create a ripple of joy that touched everyone involved. By the time they reached the ranch, Henry's heart was full in a way it hadn't been for decades. The twins waved goodbye as their mother greeted them at the gate, and Henry felt a strange, gentle ache of longing for the connections he had once neglected. Yet he also felt hope. The day had changed him, showing him that life, no matter how lonely or isolated, could be filled with small miracles, laughter, and the warmth of human kindness. As he watched the family disappear down the snowy lane, Henry held the reins of midnight tightly, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. The letter had been delivered, the girl's wishes entrusted to the magic of Christmas, and in doing so, Henry had discovered the truest gift of all, the rediscovery of his own capacity to care, to give, and to connect. The ranch was quiet again, dusted with fresh snow and bathed in the pale light of early evening. Henry Whitmore stood near the barn, gazing at the sleigh and the twinkling lights they had set up for the twins' visit. The warmth from the day lingered in his chest, a contrast to the chill in the air, a quiet reminder that something fundamental had shifted within him. He had delivered a simple letter, yes, but in doing so, he had reclaimed a part of himself that had been buried for decades. The joy of giving, the magic of connection, and the belief that even the smallest acts could ripple into profound consequences. Henry walked back to the house, thinking about the twins' bright eyes and the way they had clung to hope with unshakable faith. Their laughter still echoed in his mind, mingling with memories of his own children long gone and his late wife, Margaret. The sadness of his loneliness remained, but it had softened, replaced by the gentle certainty that he could open his life to others once again, that he could choose connection over isolation, warmth over emptiness. As he entered the house, Henry noticed movement outside, a familiar wagon slowly approaching along the snow-covered path. The twins' mother had brought her daughters to the ranch again, this time with a small basket of home-baked treats as a gesture of thanks. Henry opened the door, and the girls ran forward, wrapping him in tight hugs that were warm, genuine, and full of trust. For a moment, the wealthy rancher who had spent decades in solitude allowed himself to be fully present in the love and joy of the moment. "Henry," the taller twin exclaimed, "we wanted to bring something for you. Thank you for everything." The shorter twin held out a small drawing of the barn, decorated with the sleigh and tiny figures representing the girls and Henry himself. The lines were imperfect, but the sentiment was undeniable. Henry accepted it with care, feeling the weight of their gratitude and the sincerity of their hearts. It was a simple gift, yet it carried more meaning than any material possession he had ever owned. Henry invited the family inside, offering cocoa and cookies near the fireplace. For hours, they talked, laughed, and shared stories. The twins recounted every detail of the sleigh ride and their excitement about Santa, and Henry shared anecdotes from the ranch, sprinkled with gentle humor. In those hours, the mansion transformed, no longer a silent, echoing hall of wealth, but a space alive with warmth, connection, and laughter. That night, as the girls left and Henry watched them walk down the snowy path toward their home, he felt a sense of fulfillment that had eluded him for decades. For the first time, he understood that Christmas and life itself was not about wealth, possessions, or solitude. It was about relationships, shared joy, and the courage to let others into your world. He realized he had found a new kind of family, built not by blood or obligation, but by trust, kindness, and shared experience. Standing at the window, looking out over the snow-covered fields of his ranch, Henry made a quiet promise to himself. He would no longer retreat into isolation. He would continue to reach out, to create moments of magic and connection, and to welcome others into his life with open arms. The memory of the twin smiles, the warmth of their trust, and the joy of giving had lit something within him, a light that would guide him through many Christmases to come. Henry Whitmore, once the lonely rancher of wealth and solitude, had begun a new chapter. The walls of his mansion and the fences of his ranch no longer symbolized separation. They framed a home open to hope, friendship, and joy. And as he gazed into the softly falling snow, he whispered to himself, smiling, This is what Christmas is truly about." And with that, the lonely rancher was no longer lonely.